Before we get into Niseko and town planning and et cetera, a little bit of history about yourself. How did you come to Japan?
I'd been practicing as an architect for close to about 15 years before coming to Japan, and I was actually in the United States, practicing on the West Coast mainly for a firm in Los Angeles for about 9 years, and had the opportunity to visit Japan on business a number of times. Was fascinated by the country, and I've always been interested in contemporary Japanese architecture. So I actually came to Japan on a sabbatical to explore a few of the cultural themes that were interesting to me, and this was back in 1997. And in short order, through a project that an associate of mine asked me to do for them, we won a National Design Award, and one thing led to another, and before we knew it, we'd grown a firm here fairly rapidly. But it was really a cultural interest, an interest in Japanese society and Japanese modern culture and modern architecture that brought me here.
Okay, and how long ago was that?
Well, it was back in 1997, so it's about 16 years now. So
Okay.
it was a while ago.
So then how did you discover Niseko then?
Well, interestingly, we were invited to include we were invited to a competition in Niseko for a large resort project in Hanazono. We discovered Hanazono by visiting the project site while we were doing our due diligence for this invited competition, as architects do. Even though I had skied many, many times in Rusutsu, which is very nearby, I'd never actually visited Niseko. And this is back in 2004, I think. And we ended up winning that competition. It was a design competition, as I say, for a new resort master plan and resort architecture. And in the course of that work, of course, we explored every inch of Niseko, as we do as architects, and discovered an extraordinary landscape, an extraordinary environment, and tremendous potential in an area that was previously quite underdeveloped and still undiscovered.
And then from then on, basically the ball had started rolling in terms of international attention.
Yeah, partially true. Actually, the ball had started rolling even before my first visit to Niseko. At my first visit to Niseko, we discovered that there were already in place primarily young Australian entrepreneurs who were setting up companies there, from adventure sports companies to shuttle bus services to assist foreigners visiting the area who would otherwise, back in those days, find it difficult to access the place if they couldn't speak Japanese. But even more significantly, a couple of real estate developers who hopefully they will not take offense at me saying that they were, of course, amateur real estate developers. They did not come as professional real estate developers, but they saw an opportunity to create the kind of accommodation that was missing, designed specifically for the kinds of visitors that were beginning to come. Those visitors were primarily in those days Australian visitors who were not particularly interested in staying in the multi-bed rooms of the traditional Japanese pension, but rather, were looking for accommodation that was more akin to a reasonably priced hotel, or better still, a condominium or an apartment where they could bring their families and perhaps cook breakfast and maybe have dinner together. They were looking for a different kind of accommodation which did not exist at that time. And these entrepreneurs recognized an opportunity to create this kind of accommodation, started with 1 or 2 or 3 apartments, very quickly sold those, and then built 6 or 10 or 8, more. And then every year they were able to bring online more and more accommodation. So they really founded the international part of Niseko.
So, just for any viewers who are unclear about Niseko, it's what is so special about the place that needed to be discovered?
Sure. I mean, this is the fundamental draw for Niseko has always been for the Japanese visitors and now the increasing number of foreign visitors, this remarkable phenomena that produces around 15 meters of powder snow per annum. 15 meters of snow. Now think about that.
A lot of snow.
And that is regular, it is predictable, there is no risk that it will not snow. The snow begins in November. By December, there's absolutely a fresh layers of fresh powder snow, and basically it snows right through to April, May of the following year.
And that's a combination of geographical and climate factors, right?
That's
from what I've
correct.
understood, it's partly jet stream, partly there's the mountains that basically push the snow and keep the snow coming during that season.
Yeah, it's a complex system, but basically it's the cold air coming eastwards from the Siberian geography over the warm Sea of Japan, where moisture rises up into those cold masses. As it approaches Hokkaido, it's buffeted by the Pacific air mass, as well as the air masses over the straits between Hokkaido and Honshu. And the air mass, which is cold and laden with moisture, rises up over geographic features such as the volcano, Mount Yote, and the mountain range of Niseko Annupuri. As it flows between those two mountain ranges, or between those two geographic features, along this valley, and rises, dumps the snow. So it's a combination of these colliding air masses which are moisture laden and being impacted by the natural mountainous geography of southern Hokkaido that produces this snow.
And the culmination of all of this is actually a really uniquely, like on a global scale, a very unique phenomenon that allows so much fresh powder so low to the ground.
That's correct. The elevations above sea level are quite low, so we don't have altitude issues. It snows not because we're high above sea level. It snows because of all these other aforementioned geographic features. So we have the ability to ski in deep powder snow at levels from 300 meters above sea level to 1,300 meters above sea level. So that's one aspect that is quite unique. The other is that the snow, apparently according to some experts, contains a higher degree of salt, because it's primarily sea water that is being absorbed into the air masses. And that salt content apparently, according to some experts that I've spoken to, produces or enhances the dry, powdery characteristics of the snow. So for all of these reasons, which are better understood by people more qualified than me, the snow quality is unique, the snow depth, the amount of powder snow is extraordinary, and the amenity that it provides, the predictable long season amenity of fresh powder snow, was and has been one of the major driving forces behind increasing visitorship to the area.
So when we say discover Niseko, we're actually not talking about this barren landscape. Actually, I mean, there were people there, and what was discovered was, I think, what we're referring to as like, you know, the economic potential of bringing a global audience to a potentially new ski resort area.
Right.
There were Japanese people there before the Australians found it. What
Yes.
did they make of this? I mean, were they the farmer types, or were they the entrepreneur types? What were the local Japanese there doing
Yes.
with this opportunity?
Well, look, that's a very good question, and let's remember that today there's 1 million visitors a year to Niseko. Of those million visitors a year, only 100,000 at the moment are foreigners. The number of foreigners is increasing. That 100,000 has been a very rapidly increasing number, whereas the number of Japanese visiting has been very steady. So prior to the foreigners coming to Niseko, yes, of course, it was an established resort for the Japanese domestic tourist market. But the Japanese visitors traditionally have very different expectations to foreign visitors. So the Japanese are content typically to buy a package tour from a JR station in Tokyo or Nagoya that includes a pension accommodation, which includes breakfast and dinner, ski hire and lift tickets. And that is the kind of visitorship that was happening before. Consequently, the resort was tailor-made to that kind of visitorship. The mountain, well, in part, the resort was a number of disconnected, disparate lift systems. Tokyu, a railway operator in Japan, owns one slice of Niseko Mountain. Chuo Bus owns another slice of Niseko Mountain, and so forth. And previously, those slices weren't connected. Each one sold their own disparate ticket, and if you strayed into someone else's system, you'd have to buy a ticket to get back. So
highly fragmented.
It was highly
really
fragmented.
localized.
There was really no integration of no economic integration, and in some ways no physical integration of these disparate resorts. But that was sort of okay for the Japanese visitors who bought these package deals from those transportation companies in the first place. Now, so, you know, Niseko did have a limited number of restaurants, few, because, as I say, most people ate at the hotels. They didn't wander about town looking for bars or looking for F&B opportunities after a day's skiing. They pretty much skied all day, retired back to their hotel, ate in the hotel, took an onsen in their hotel, and smoked cigarettes, and then collapsed in a heap to start the next day early in the morning from that hotel. What the Australians brought to the equation was a Western concept of a ski resort, where essentially you come to not just ski, but to have a really good time and to eat and wander about and go to bars and to meet people, to have a social experience, a spontaneous social experience. And what that then entailed was a transformation of the physical environment up there to accommodate those needs. Number one, it became clear with these more sophisticated expectations of foreign visitors and the increasingly sophisticated expectations of Japanese visitors too, that this disconnected series of disparate mountain slices was just no longer tenable. And so Niseko United was formed to create an interconnected series of ski opportunities that were all available on a single lift pass. So this transformed the breadth of skier opportunities on the mountain. Secondly, with the advent of more bars, more restaurants, more cafes, more eating and dining and shopping opportunities, driven in large part by foreign entrepreneurs who recognized the demand and fulfilled that demand by setting up initially small and then increasingly larger operations. The landscape, the physical landscape of, say, for example, Hirafu Town, one of the main villages in Niseko, transformed into a place of a lot more variety and promenading in the evenings and people walking around after a ski day. So all these physical changes came about as a consequence of the foreign entrepreneurs recognizing foreign expectations and building to them.
Well, when you say came about too, I mean there's still more to come. I mean,
Yes.
in terms of what I think, in terms of making Niseko as a fully fledged international ski resort. What can you tell us about your involvement in bringing it to where it is today, and where you want to see it go from
Okay.
now?
Well, look, that's a good question, and actually our involvement was initially from being hired by a large Australian corporation to master plan a ski resort, a very large ski resort at the base of the Niseko Annupuri mountain. In other words, essentially a new town, a new village. We were hired to design a new village that was part of this overall lift system. And that has evolved into being master architects for PCPD, a Hong Kong-based company owned by Richard Lee. So while all this was happening, other major international developers have stepped in. YTL from Malaysia purchased what was the Prince Hotel in Annupuri, which had been then sold to Citigroup, that turned it into a Hilton hotel, and now that has been purchased by YTL, who are a very large resort developer in Southeast Asia, and their intention is to further expand it with a new village in Annupuri. Again, it's all connected to the Niseko United Lift Pass system. It's all part of the Niseko system, but their intention is to expand it. And other significant developers have come in from Asia, from China, and have purchased large tracts of land with the intention of developing larger scale and five-star quality resort hotel accommodation in this area. So our involvement has been in parallel with the influx of professional deep-pocketed real estate developers who are part of this new generation of developers who are taking Niseko into the future. Their projects will define what Niseko will become over the next 10, 15 years. Their projects, which are much larger in scale to anything that's happened in the past, will essentially be the new Niseko. The DNA of Niseko is still there, but they're fleshing it out with their resources.
Very interesting point there. I mean, what you basically said in a nutshell is there's going to be, the future of Niseko is dependent on a lot of heavy foreign investment.
Yes.
How is, and earlier you mentioned as well on the ski lifts they were fragmented. I mean, when we say Niseko, we're actually talking about 3 different townships, right?
Well, actually even more than 3 different townships. In fact, we have a drawing right here.
If we could zoom in on that, that'd be great.
This is the Niseko Annupuri range, mountain range, and at the base of it is the main village, which is Grand Hirafu, or Hirafu village. But there's also, in this area called Higashiyama, the Hilton Hotel and what we're now calling Niseko Village, and an expanding village that is being driven in large part by YTL's operations. Then in Annupuri, which is owned by Chuo Bus, but has multiple ownership of all of the base real estate by a handful of developers, mostly international developers, is also expanding rapidly to become a larger village in and of itself. Next door to that is Moiwa, which has always been a small village, again, working off of the same mountain, but that recently has been purchased, large tracts have been purchased by foreign developers from Hong Kong and Singapore, and they are also rapidly expanding their operations with the intention of increasing the size of the village there. And then at the other side of the mountain here is Hanazono, which, as I mentioned earlier, we were hired to master plan, and we are now the master architects of a very large project that is in construction and that is scheduled to be built over the next several years in phases. Hong Kong developer Richard Lee, PCPD. And so, as you can see, Niseko Mountain is the product of six significant urban places that are all expanding in their own right.
And
Yeah.
that's my point. Earlier you had mentioned Niseko gets 1 million visitors a year, 10% are foreigners, but those
Yeah.
10% basically are kind of spreading the word and
That's
drawing
correct.
and being advocates, drawing
Yeah.
these deep-pocketed investors.
Yes.
However, the word Niseko itself actually, like you mentioned, encompasses a bunch of different townships and stuff,
True.
whereas the foreign people kind of say Niseko as being the whole area. When a developer wants to come in, or when the economic factors want to move something forward, are there any political factors that kind of clash with the economic desires, or is the townships willing to work with the developers, or is it what kind of a case is it in that sense?
Well, that's a good question. And first of all, Niseko, as I say, the word comes from this mountain range, which is the Niseko Annupuri mountain. That's the mountain that people are skiing on. And it so happens, as I've described, that at the base of the mountain are various villages. Each village has a different name, but they're all part of the Niseko system. So Niseko really is an area. It's an area that the name describes, an area that contains a number of villages and a lift system which is interconnected and integrated. The Niseko area is actually divided into two administrative municipalities, if you like. One is Kuchan town for the northern half of the Niseko area. The other is Niseko village, which is a township some kilometers distant from the Niseko mountain, but they govern the southern half of the mountain. So, and those are two political entities that are quite different in character. Most of the development happening today is in the Kuchan Cho, in the Kuchan township jurisdiction. And that jurisdiction has traditionally and historically been an agricultural jurisdiction. The industries historically there and today have always been primarily agricultural. And so the sensibilities of the people and of the governance of the town and the mayor and so forth is let's say, less internationally focused than you might expect for an area that is becoming increasingly an international destination. So they have been in the past, in the last several years, in the last decade of Niseko's rapid growth, been somewhat bewildered by the nature of its growth, driven primarily by foreign investors, and a bit skeptical. They've been, as is not atypical in Japan, a bit skeptical of what foreigners will come up with and how enduring and sustainable these foreign ideas might be. But they've grown to see that, notwithstanding the global financial crisis, the earthquake of 2011 and the subsequent disasters, they've seen that, notwithstanding all of these hiccups, that there's been sustained growth and sustained visitorship, in fact, extraordinary increases in visitorship over time to this area by foreigners. That's the local township. And they recognize that there is something going on here, and they recognize that there are employment opportunities for the townspeople, employment opportunities for the youth that would otherwise migrate to the mainland because young people are not interested in becoming farmers, and that there are increasing economic opportunities for the local community as well.
It's absolutely amazing when you go up there too. I mean, I was up there a couple months ago, and it's when you start talking to the locals and everything, it's almost more international than Tokyo in a lot of respects, the way it is now. So it's got this momentum, okay, and it's got this, there's this momentum, and when I was up there as well, there was a lot of talk about using the Whistler model. In terms of growth. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. The Whistler model is basically a designed village, a village that you can create in an integrated way from scratch because you're working with a blank sheet of paper. And actually, and Whistler was actually created that way. It was master planned and done very successfully. And in a way, that Whistler model is one that we are applying to our design for the Hanazono Resort, and YTL are applying to the design of their new village out at Niseko Village. And when you have a company-owned town or a single ownership of a large area, you have the opportunity to create everything according to an integrated image of your choosing. But that's not really possible so much in a town like Hirafu, which is the product of multiple ownerships and a complex municipality. But what they have learnt from Whistler, and by they I mean the authorities who govern the town, as well as individual developers who have been doing their homework and looking at analogues for how they might develop within this environment. What they have learned from towns like Whistler, which by the way was based on Zermatt in Switzerland, an organic community that grew in an integrated way. What they've learned is that through the integration of the multiple forces within a town, by bringing all the stakeholders, the disparate stakeholders together within a township, bring them together around a common vision for how the town should evolve or how the area should evolve, by agreeing to what is important culturally and socially, architecturally, about a place, and then making sure you preserve it while allowing development to occur in a responsible way through guidance and through rules and bylaws. You can actually create a place that has tremendous value rather than allow it to evolve in a haphazard way. And Niseko, for all of those million visitors a year and the 100,000 plus that are coming each year of foreigners, is still in its embryonic form. We're early enough in its evolution to be able to influence its growth into the future through proper management, through good town planning. And we are, my company, very much involved in that by doing pro bono master plans, by creating, as we did a few years ago, a master plan design for the new main street, which attracted $12 million of government funding for its implementation. The first phase of it has been complete, and the next two phases will be completed in the next couple of years. So the national government, as well as the regional government, as well as the local governments, recognize that Niseko has tremendous value going forwards. They recognize the need for public investment in the area. They have actually followed up with significant sums of money to actually effect that public investment. So they're actually doing it. They're not just talking about it. The government is actually doing it, and they are doing what is necessary to create not just the physical infrastructure improvements, but also create legislation, let's say, in terms of master plans and bylaws to guide a future development so that the end result will be of maximum value to everybody.
So is this like a steady march to success then? I mean, over the next 5-10 years, or are there places where the process could come unhinged, where it could delay perhaps any growth or implementation of any of the plans that you've drawn up?
That's a good question. I'd have to say that it's a steady march to success because we have, in part because we have government backing, I mean serious government backing in the form of encouragement as well as government investment in the area. And I just talked about Hirafuzaka, the new main street that the government is building with government funding. And by the way, it's the first foreign-designed piece of public infrastructure in Japan. So that's quite interesting, okay? But we also see the government investing in the Shinkansen that will bring Tokyo to within 3.5 hours of Niseko once it's completed. We see government investment to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in the new Chitose airport, which now has direct flights to Northern Europe, all parts of Asia, China, and even the United States. So we're seeing an influx of people from Finland and Scandinavia, as well as America and France and Italy, in addition to, of course, all the people coming from Singapore and Malaysia and China and so forth. So that's one aspect that will give this a high degree of sustainability going forwards. The other is because there's an enduring capability on the part of the individual investors, the individual real estate developers, that has been tested pretty thoroughly over the last 5 years. Again, I mentioned the global financial crisis, the Tohoku disaster, Fukushima. These were major hits to the Japanese economy. They were major hits to the global economy. And discretionary spending, tourism are one of the first things to suffer when you have these kinds of significant economic catastrophes. And what we've seen is a rapid bounce back, notwithstanding the gravity of those events. This area, and proven by the visitorship numbers, has bounced back significantly.
If we can zoom in on this, actually, right here, this is a pretty significant slide that we have.
Right. This is visitorship from 2001 to 2012, foreign visitors to the Niseko area. And it went from about 5,000 visitors, foreign visitors, in 2001 to close to 100,000 visitors in 2012. What we see a dip that happened in 2007 and 2008. This is the global financial crisis, the GFC. And then it very quickly bounced back the following year to where the graph, basically the curve, essentially remained untouched. And then another very steep incline as a result of the primarily the 2011, a decline because of the Tohoku disaster.
But then after the Tohoku disaster, look at that. That's just like meteoric right there.
Right. So this winter, we've seen a 30% increase over the last record year of visitorship to the area. So, what we're seeing, if we average this out, we see that there is a sustainable, steady growth that somehow manages to deal with significant economic disasters and natural disasters of an epic scale. So that's why I'm sort of confident in saying, I mean, if you'd asked me this 2 or 3 years ago, I'd say, well, I'm not sure that it can outlive some of these global perturbations. But actually we have done. The area has managed to recover quickly, notwithstanding the scale of those events. And so the question is how and why? Why do people come back? Why is it able to recover so quickly? And I'd have to say the answer is, one, political will. There's enough support from the government to show that the government's behind it.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, like you basically what you've outlined for us is you've shown how direct foreign investment can actually instigate support from a local government,
right,
and even all the way up to a national level to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars
yes,
in infrastructure layout and commissioning of planning and
right,
and et cetera. Japan, with its image of kind of, this goes against completely the image of Japan as kind of being closed to foreigners and difficult
right,
to do business with.
Right.
The local authorities in Niseko, given
yes,
where it is now, are they easier to deal with now than they were maybe 5 years ago?
Oh yes, absolutely. And that's also a very interesting cultural phenomenon. So 5 years ago, they were a little bit skeptical and bewildered by what foreigners intended to do, and they were being very careful about approvals and so forth. Now they understand through experience what foreigners want to do, and they understand the vision of the future. So they're very amenable, they're very easy to deal with. But now we're going through a new stage, interestingly, a new stage of evolution of the mindset of the local authorities. And that is that now they're beginning to see large development companies come into the area, purchase these large tracts of land, knock down the pre-existing hotels, which might have been, a little bit decrepit to start with, in order to avoid paying asset tax. And rather than replace them quickly with their 5-star properties, they're waiting. They're waiting until, they've got their financing organized. They're waiting until they're sure that the global economy's recovery is assured. They're waiting for someone else to start first or whatever. So these larger institutional developers are in their land banking mode currently, which may all end next year because we've seen such a tremendous growth in visitorship this current season, or it may last another year or two. But what the local authorities are realizing now is that foreign development compulsion is not the same as Japanese development compulsion. In Japan, when a developer buys a piece of land, you can bet he's going to put a building on it pretty quick smart. And all the laws and the rules and the regulations in Japan are designed to accommodate that rapid turnover of buildings. What they're not used to is people buying land and then sitting on it for years at a time. So they don't have the protections in place to assure that an area will retain its energy, its social electricity, if you like, through constant renewal and constant growth. So the local authorities now are becoming a bit skeptical of institutional investors who are coming in and requiring commitments by those institutional investors to develop within a certain time frame. Let's say they're experimenting with language in requesting these developers to move forwards within a reasonable time frame.
Is this in the shape of a bylaw, or is this in the shape
Well,
of
that's what they're talking about
or?
now.
Okay.
Those requirements aren't in place. At the moment, it's in the shape of memorandums of understanding, MOUs.
Okay. At the time of purchase?
At the time of purchase, especially if the developer is wanting to purchase some government-owned land as part of their acquisition, or if the developer is looking to enhance the infrastructure to service their land or whatever. There's always an interdependence between larger landholders and the government or the local authorities because of infrastructure requirements and permit requirements. So currently there's been an evolution of the language of memoranda of understanding to encourage developers to build within a healthy time frame. That may result in the next few years possibly in changes of legislation, maybe changes of tax laws that as they exist today encourage land purchasers to demolish buildings that are not performing well rather than hang on to them. But rather demolish them in order to achieve certain tax advantages, and then let the land lie fallow until they're ready to replace those buildings. So new laws may well assist these developers in retaining those buildings, even if they're old and they're not generating much in the way of revenue, but still are part of the social environment of these villages. Retain those buildings until such a time as it's convenient to knock them down to make way for the new development. So there's a process of tweaking local codes and of tweaking tax laws and legislation to arrive at what everybody wants in the area, and that is to maintain and sustain an energetic, vibrant local economy and vibrant social landscape in the area. So it's an evolving process.
So it's a steady march to success. It's seen its ups and downs, but mainly ups. Foreign investment, it's a story of foreign investment that has spurred local support to bring it to where it is today. This Niseko is the most fleshed out model of foreign direct investment in Japan that has the most tangible effect on a location.
Yes.
Where else can this model be applied to in Japan, do you think? Is there any other potential hotspots that you could apply the same type of thing to?
Yeah. Interestingly, Hakuba in Nagano is another area where foreign investment has been in place for several years now. And in fact, a lot of the Australian entrepreneurs that came into Niseko back in 2001 and earlier and saw the rapid rise of value as a result of the changing of the branding, let's say, of the broadcasting of the new Niseko brand, they saw an opportunity in Hakuba, in Nagano, to do the same thing. And so it's interesting, where does the money go? Where does the smart money go? I mean, the free market is always looking for these opportunities. As architects and master planners, we actually follow them because they hire our services. And what we see is that area has been earmarked for perhaps the next growth area in foreign direct investment in a resort environment. There are some limitations to that area, though. They have some handicaps which in the Hakuba area, which don't exist here. But they may well be able to overcome those handicaps over time. As far as other ski resorts are concerned, we haven't seen much success or much evidence of foreign direct investment yet in alternative locations.
Even if it's not a ski resort, is there anything south, more closer to the equator, that you can see perhaps some Okinawan potential or something in Kyushu?
Yeah, well, certainly Okinawa is a logical destination for foreign direct investment, except that Okinawa has its own challenges with respect to the participation of the local government, and also Okinawa has always been a popular tourist destination for the domestic tourism industry. So in Okinawa there are already established Japanese development companies that have built up an infrastructure of tourist-related resources, primarily aimed at the Japanese market. For foreigners to come in and compete maybe is a little more challenging. One of the things about Hokkaido, Niseko in particular, is that the Japanese institutional developers haven't really done much up there and are not doing much up there yet either, for various reasons. And so it's actually pretty good for foreign investors because they don't have much local competition, if you like.
Is that a threat in the future? Say because of foreign direct investment, it gets past a certain size, and then the domestic players decide, okay, well, we're going to start, throwing our weight around up there. What are the challenges that can happen up there because of that?
I think, from my perspective, I think it's a high quality problem if it were to happen. I see no evidence of it happening yet, but if it were to happen, I think it would be very good because the institutional domestic development companies like Tokyu, for example, that own one of the lift systems and that own one of the hotels there, they know that the landscape for them in the future has to be of a much higher quality than what they had conceived of in the past. If they are to invest in the area, they'll be building to international standards, not domestic standards. They will be contributing to the area in a way that is compatible with Niseko's international brand image. It no longer has a local brand image. The expectations have become more sophisticated. and therefore Japanese developers will need to conform to those expectations, which I think is good. Look, competition is good, whether the competition is coming from abroad or whether it's coming from the domestic market. It all drives improvement. I just don't see it happening yet from the domestic side. There's been no evidence of that yet.
Interesting. So you've got a situation in Niseko as well that also solves the demographic issue too. I mean, earlier you had mentioned that because we've got a lot of great tourism and facilities here, needs creating jobs, creating opportunities. The young people are actually staying in Niseko
Right.
as well. How excited is the government on all levels about that demographic reversal of what's happening in the rest of the country?
Look, they're very excited. They're extremely excited. They understand it. The numbers are clear. Not only are the young people staying, but there's actually a net in-migration of young people from Honshu and the other islands. I'm talking about young Japanese, who are coming here to service the burgeoning tourist industry. And that's been going on for several years now. So we're seeing a growth of employment that is overtaking what the local population is able to serve. Now that's a very good thing for obvious reasons. In addition to that, the local agricultural producers, and this is really key, they're so proud of their products there. They're so proud of their potatoes and their corn and all their wonderful agricultural produce in the area. They are seeing that foreigners, especially foreigners coming from Asia, from Southeast Asia and the Far East, they're seeing these people come to enjoy Japanese restaurants, Japanese produce, Japanese foodstuffs. And they do. The culinary arts are a particular orientation of Asian visitors. And what they see is an ability to showcase their products in this area. So what we're seeing now is these local farmers are repackaging their wares, repackaging their products in a way that is not just appealing, but actually convenient for foreign visitors to buy and take home as souvenirs or in bulk for their needs back wherever they come from. So there's an enthusiasm amongst the local agricultural community, not just because of increased employment aspects for their children or for other Japanese, but also because there's an economic and cultural appreciation of what they do. Now there's a downside to this as well. So that's all positive and it's all understood. The downside with this rapid development of these traditional agricultural communities is that you inevitably displace a lot of the vernacular amenities with new amenities. So whereas before you may have had a traditional Japanese restaurant in a pension building on the main street, the restaurant run by the grandmother of the owner of the pension, the grandmother who goes to the coast every morning to get fresh seaweed for their cuisine. Suddenly they find themselves sitting on a piece of property that's worth 40 times what they paid for it. And for whatever reason they decide to sell. Well, typically they're selling to a foreigner who sees that property being on the main street as underutilized, and they will replace it with a building of higher and better use. This is free market economics at work. And yes, they may well have a retail component within that larger building. It won't be a pension, of course. It'll be a series of apartments with a retail space on the ground floor. That retail space demands a certain rental income to justify its existence. The grandmother in her restaurant can't pay those rental rates. And so what may well go in there, and what we've seen go in, are things like perhaps a pizza restaurant or some other perhaps Western branded restaurant, which displaces a traditionally vernacular idiosyncratic Japanese restaurant. So this is one of the darker sides of this development scenario, is that unless you can put protections in place to preserve some of the characteristics of a traditional Japanese community, which may not be revenue generating in the sort of stellar way that some of these other uses might be, then you may lose those Japanese characteristics. It's a complex formula. Yeah.
It invokes images of colonization. I mean,
Well,
in some, not to that extent, but I mean, like, not to the extent that it was in a historical sense, but you've got the traditional kind of being replaced with, you know, the big flashy pizza shop and et cetera, et cetera. Are there some people there that have that kind of that attitude to it?
Yeah, look, to some degree, yes, there's a certain amount of colonization that's happening. It's not all negative. There's a self-correcting aspect to it too, because as I say, a lot of the foreign visitors are not coming to eat pizza, and they're not coming to eat Indian curry. They're coming to eat Japanese food. And so what's happening is that young or strategically capable Japanese entrepreneurs are opening Japanese restaurants that can cater to those foreign needs and producing Japanese food of you know, very good quality, but doing it in a strategic way. So, for example, with a bilingual menu that previously didn't exist, therefore immediately accessible to foreigners. So these opportunities are available for Japanese entrepreneurs, and we're seeing an influx of these young Japanese entrepreneurs who are creating, or let's say, they are expanding the menu of choices available to visitors from a Japanese culinary tradition. But the downside is only that they have to operate within a new economic reality. Rents are going to be higher, their revenues have to be higher. They have to be more clever about how they appeal, how they make money, how they run their businesses. They have to be efficient. They have to market their services. You know, so it's an evolution of a system that is driven in large part because of these colonizing forces that are impacting the economy.
Okay. Well, we've pretty much gone over everything there. I mean, is there anything you'd like to say to sum up what we've talked about? Is there more agricultural opportunity or land that's in other areas that are good for development?
Well, look,
in a different way? Or?
Yes. Well, I can say that first of all, what we're seeing there in Niseko is an interesting model of development that involves, or that's actually been, let's say, catalyzed primarily by foreign investors, by foreign entrepreneurs who recognized an opportunity that prior generations of inhabitants hadn't recognized. And the net result of that is the projects, for example, that we're working on and other architects are working on, which is really interesting buildings, really interesting planning projects, really beautiful resorts. We're seeing an amelioration of the built landscape in the area. Dowdy streets with overhead power lines and slippery sidewalks or non-existent sidewalks are now being converted to become much more beautiful, much more user-friendly, much safer, much more attractive urban environments with beautiful buildings, with international architecture, and a broader range of amenities and opportunities for Japanese visitors as well as foreign visitors. So there's an amelioration of the natural, of the cultural environment. The natural environment is not suffering because, you know, Japanese environmental laws are strong enough to protect them, and we have to apply those laws to any building or resort project development that we conceive. In fact, what's happening is we're further bolstering the integrity of the natural environment by having the economic power that private development provides us with to enhance the natural environment, to protect it, to create the infrastructure necessary to further protect the natural environment. So it's a good thing.